Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk to you today about Air Force ROTC and my experience with it over the past year in guiding candidates through the process. And I'm talking about application year 2020 into 2021. And to say that this year was a difficult one for Air Force ROTC in general would be an understatement. Uh, in that they were supposed to have three scholarship boards scheduled this year, and they only ended up having two. They had an October board, and then they canceled the January board and moved the rest of the remaining candidates to the March board. And then you weren't told you had a scholarship until like late April. So the Air Force really, um, kept a lot of applicants last year hanging. And I would really characterize it as sort of as a mismanagement of their applicants. And I certainly hope that this next year the Air Force ROTC doesn't do the same thing that they did this previous year in the management of their applicants, as well as their management of their cadets in ROTC itself. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that also here in this kind of brief podcast here today. So my candidates that I work with this year, they made out well if they competed on the October board. So if they were able to get all of their application done, including the interview by late September, early October, and they competed on the October board last year, they generally got a scholarship if they, of course, had fairly good SAT scores, solid scores, and did well on the interview. The interview counts for close to 50% of the scholarship for the Air Force, and then the remainder is SAT scores or ACT scores, GPA, and about 5% is the Air Force fitness test, and then they do add some for activities. But the big part is really SAT, ACT, and the interview, as well, of course, as what major you're picking. The Air Force certainly puts a high premium on their technical majors, engineering, hard sciences. You can find out more about this in my blog posts or in my book that goes into detail in this. Well, so those candidates that I work with that got all their stuff in early and competed on the October board did okay. So, I don't know if you can move to this year's lessons learned and say, well, I better get my stuff in early, because if I get my stuff in later, it may not cost me to get an Air Force scholarship. I'm hoping that this year they'll manage it better so that candidates that compete later can have an equal chance of getting a scholarship as someone did it on the October board. So on the October board, I had people get a type 1, type 2, and type 7. So if you're satisfied with a type 7, on this October board, and you don't think you can do any better on your SAT or ACT from, October, November, and December to compete on these kind of January boards, I would recommend this year, meaning 2021, that you compete on this October board with whatever SATs you got and take a type 7 and then call it a day. It's just that what happened was the candidates that I had that didn't get their stuff in on time, or decided to compete on a later board, they got pushed and they didn't get to the January board, and when they got to the March board, a lot of them didn't get picked up. And and I thought some candidates who I frankly thought would get picked up on this October, that I thought would get picked up in January and March, that would have got picked up on the October board, did not get picked up. And it was really disappointing, because these people I know would have made great Air Force ROTC cadets, and would have progressed through the program well and had but they didn't get selected. and they had great scores, great people, and the Air Force missed out here big time by mismanaging, in my opinion, this last year's scholarship applications, and they really just lost out, and they lost some really good people at the end there that are probably never going to go back to Air Force ROTC. I can tell you that probably a lot of people don't know, that it was mismanaged, just in my opinion, as badly as it was. So on top of that, with Air Force ROTC, they mismanaged their cadets that are in the program. And I refer you to a Washington Post article dated May 9th of 2021 by Alex Horton that talks about the scholarships that were taken away by Air Force ROTC. Now, what happens with Air Force that isn't the same case with Navy and Army is that you must earn a slot to field training, which is kind of a gateway for Air Force ROTC. So your sophomore year, your freshman and sophomore year, but sophomore year in particular, you're working really hard in Air Force ROTC to try to get picked up for field training. And if you are not picked up for field training, you cannot advance to your junior and senior year, your last 2 years of Air Force ROTC. And that is a selective process, and you may not get picked up for it. I mean, it's just each year it fluctuates. You see some years it's 90%, some years it's 80%, 70%. It really depends, and it doesn't matter if you have a scholarship or you don't have a scholarship. You got to do well in Air Force ROTC and impress the professor of aerospace science and get selected for it. And if you don't, you lose your scholarship if you're on scholarship. If you don't go to field training. And so you're in a situation where you're at a very competitive college or university, maybe on a Type 1 Air Force scholarship, and you don't get selected for field training, and then your scholarship's taken away from you. And that's what happened this past year to Air Force ROTC cadets. So this article goes in and says, and I'll read it part to you here. The Air Force first of all, the Air Force took away more than 130 scholarships. They told about 400 cadets that they could not advance in ROTC this year. And so they actually then restored about 130 of these scholarships, saying that as they said, the Air Force reversed its decision to dismiss hundreds of reserve officer training cadets and restored nearly 130 scholarships. After a lobbying effort assailed the decision as a punishment for many qualified cadets that would create catastrophic financial problems. This has to do with, so here's one example. Kalili Glasser, a 20-year-old studying mechanical engineering at MIT, said that she had flawless grades and rose for the crew team, but her future career and scholarship imploded on a Zoom phone call with her commander on April 20th when she learned of her rejection. So this is before field training. She was told that she could no longer, wasn't selected for field training. She's a mechanical engineer at MIT, great grades, and is told to hit the road, basically, by Air Force ROTC. I can tell you this would never happen with Army or Navy ROTC, and it's just, you've got to go into your eyes wide open with the Air Force ROTC scholarship and realize that you may not get selected for field training, and that you may lose your scholarship. And so in this case, a lot of people complained and restored the scholarships to a bunch of candidates. Now, they may have also let some of those 400 people back without a scholarship. So the cut, was really, really tough this year. So it's about 25%. And this year it cut nearly half this year of the 2,300 cadets. So they cut, a whole bunch. So the Air Force caught a lot of flack for this. And so what do they have to say about this? They said that cutting the flow of high-performing cadets is misguided. They said that the Air Force said that it was a mistake and that there's some serious trust issues there. This is some quotes from some cadets. Until now, I had very full trust in the Air Force, she said. It wasn't until this past month that I realized that not always how it's going to be. Another one said, this should have never happened, said one reinstated cadet who spoke on the condition of anonymity, out of concern for the consequence. The only thing that got them to reverse their decision was the attention from outside. And so that's what happened. So you had a situation this year, in summary, where if you just happen to get in your application late for Air Force ROTC, you were significantly prejudiced with getting an Air Force ROTC scholarship this year. And if you just happen to be a second-year cadet in Air Force ROTC this past year, you might have been cut from ROTC from a high-cost college or university where you might have lost your scholarship. So you just got to know that going into Air Force ROTC, you got to know that might happen to you. And so what I'm hoping for this next year in year 2021, 2022, that the Air Force gets their act together and has a much better year for the scholarship as well as managing their cadets in the program, because I really think that they disenfranchised a bunch of people, and really a lot of people lost trust in this whole Air Force process over this past year. So I wanted just to talk to you about that here for a few minutes, and about the Air Force, about what happened this past year, and just so your eyes are wide open, so you know exactly what is happening, and what hopefully we won't expect in the future. So as part of this, on the end of this, in the podcast notes itself, I'll add in the Washington Post article, as well as this link that kind of talks about the field training and what is all involved with that. So take care, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.